My name is Olivia Carter, and at 23, I never imagined that the day of my college graduation would be the day my family's carefully maintained facade shattered into pieces. Standing side by side with my younger brother Aaron, both of us draped in navy blue caps and gowns, should have been a day of shared triumph. But behind our tight smiles, years of favoritism and quiet betrayals had set the stage for an unexpected reckoning. I can still hear my father's dismissive words, the same ones that had trailed me like a shadow throughout my life. Aaron has real potential, Olivia. You'll be fine on your own. The sting of those words had followed me all the way from our home in suburban Denver to the hallowed halls of Granton University. Before I unravel the events that turned my graduation into a moment of liberation, let me know in the comments below if you've ever had to carve out your own path when no one else believed in you. Growing up, our house looked picture perfect. A neatly trimmed lawn, a white paneled house with a porch swing my mother loved to decorate for every holiday. Inside, though, the truth was far less idyllic. My father, Charles, was a real estate broker with a booming voice and a talent for making others feel small. My mother, Janice, was a part-time librarian who believed in tradition and quiet compliance. And then there was Aaron, 2 years my junior, who had a smile that seemed to light up the room and a knack for getting exactly what he wanted. From as early as I could remember, Aaron was the chosen one. At every birthday party, his cake was bigger, the guest list longer. At every school assembly, our parents would lean forward eagerly to watch him take the stage, while I sat unnoticed in the back row. Olivia, you're so independent, Mom would say, when I asked why I had to walk myself to piano lessons while they drove Aaron to soccer practice. You don't need us the way he does. Even at 10, I understood that independence was just another word for neglect. By high school, I'd learned to keep my head down and work twice as hard for half the recognition. I threw myself into my studies and part-time jobs, hoping that if I became exceptional enough, they'd finally see me. When I won first place in the statewide math competition, my math teacher, Mr. Simmons, called home to share the news. My father barely looked up from his laptop. "That's nice, Liv," he said. "But don't forget to help Aaron with his history project. It's due next week." Aaron, meanwhile, was celebrated for every small achievement. When he made the varsity baseball team, my parents hosted a barbecue in his honor. When I was accepted into Granton University's prestigious finance program, I got a curt nod and a distracted "good job, kiddo." It wasn't just the big moments. It was the little ways they made it clear who mattered more. At Christmas, Aaron would get the latest phone while I unwrapped discount store scarves. At family dinners, they'd hang on his every word while I sat quietly, my achievements politely ignored. I tried not to let it break me. Grandma Rose, my mother's mother, was the only one who truly saw me. "You've got fire, Liv," she'd whisper when we were alone. "Don't let them put it out." Those summers at Grandma Rose's cabin were my sanctuary. She'd sit on the porch with me, watching the sun dip below the Rockies, while I sketched or scribbled ideas in my worn journal. "You see the world in a way most people can't," she'd say. "Use that. It's your gift." By senior year of high school, I'd developed a quiet determination that even I hadn't recognized in myself. I joined the investment club, captained the debate team, and kept my GPA at a perfect 4.0, all while working evenings at a coffee shop downtown. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Daniels, called me a force of nature. "You're going to do great things," she'd say. I clung to those words like a lifeline. The real test came when it was time to apply for college. Aaron and I both set our sights on Granton, the top-tier university in the state. When we both got our acceptance letters on the same day, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe now they'd see me as an equal. But as soon as Aaron opened his letter and announced his acceptance to Granton's business program, the household erupted in celebration. Champagne bottles popped and laughter filled the kitchen as Aaron beamed under the glow of their approval. I tried to share in the moment, but my acceptance into the finance program, equally prestigious, went unnoticed. "We knew you'd do fine," Liv Mom said, absently, turning back to Aaron. "But this is huge for your brother." It wasn't just a celebration. It was a confirmation of what I'd always known in their eyes. Aaron was the future, and I was the footnote. 2 weeks later, we sat down for the conversation that would cement the final crack in our family's foundation. It was a rare dinner, with no phones, no distractions. My father cleared his throat. "We've been saving for college since you were both born." He began, his eyes locked on Aaron. "We can cover your tuition completely, Aaron, so you can focus on your studies." My brother's eyes sparkled with relief and excitement. "Thanks, Dad," he said. "I'll make you proud." "And what about me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My mother hesitated, glancing at my father. "Olivia," she said carefully, "there's only enough for one. We think Aaron's program is the better investment." The words hit me like a slap. Investment. As if I were some risky venture not worth the bet. My mother tried to soften it. "You're resourceful, Liv. You'll figure something out. Loans, maybe? Or start at a community college and transfer later." For a moment, the room went silent. I looked at Aaron, who had the decency to look away, guilt flickering across his face. "I worked so hard," I said softly. "Don't I deserve the same chance?" Dad's jaw tightened. "You'll be fine, Olivia. You always are." That night, I lay in bed staring at the glow of the streetlights outside my window. My dreams of Granton felt like they were slipping away before they even began. But Grandma Rose's words echoed in my head. "You've got fire, Liv. Don't let them put it out." The next morning, I woke up with a single clear decision: I would go to Granton. I'd find a way, even if it meant doing it alone. I wouldn't let them define my worth. I didn't know it then, but that decision would be the first step toward rewriting not just my future, but the entire story of who I was meant to be. I woke up the next morning with my decision hardening like steel in my chest. I would go to Granton University. I didn't care how many hours I had to work, or how many nights I would cry myself to sleep. I was going to prove them all wrong. I started with the practical steps. I spent the entire weekend buried in paperwork, scholarship applications, grant forms, and loan packets. My fingers cramped from typing, my eyes burned from staring at my laptop screen. But with every word I wrote about my determination, about the obstacles I'd already overcome, I felt my resolve strengthening. Mrs. Daniels, my guidance counselor, became my unofficial mentor. She stayed after school every day for a week, reviewing essays and financial aid forms with me. "You're one of the most driven students I've ever worked with," she told me one evening, as we sat in her cluttered office, the walls covered in motivational posters and faded photos of past graduates. "You're going to find a way. I know it." Her faith in me was like a hand on my back, steadying me when doubt tried to pull me under. In those first weeks, I applied for dozens of scholarships, some big, some small. All of them another chance to prove that I was worth investing in. I'd stay up past midnight, rewriting personal statements, searching for opportunities that might cover even a fraction of the tuition. My bedroom became a war room, sticky notes and highlighters scattered everywhere. Every time I felt overwhelmed, I'd remember Grandma Rose's words, "You've got fire, Liv. Don't let them put it out." Slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. A local women in finance group awarded me a small scholarship. The coffee shop where I worked offered a flexible schedule so I could take on more shifts. Still, it wasn't enough to cover everything. Rent in the city was outrageous, and even after securing a federal loan and scraping together every cent I'd saved, there was still a gap. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I'd live off campus in a rundown apartment 45 minutes away from Granton. It was a tiny place above a mechanic's garage with peeling paint and a kitchen sink that only worked when you jiggled the faucet just right. But it was mine, and it was cheap. Moving day came fast. My parents were busy helping Aaron move into his dorm suite, bright, modern, fully furnished. I didn't bother asking them for help with my move. Instead, I called on a couple of friends from the coffee shop, and we loaded everything I owned into my beat-up old Corolla. My boxes were mostly second-hand hand-me-down dishes from Grandma Rose thrift store towels and clothes I'd patched up more times than I could count. As we carried the last box up the narrow stairs, I paused at the door to my new home, the key trembling in my hand. For a moment, fear threatened to overwhelm me. Could I really do this alone? Could I work enough hours, keep my grades up, and still hold on to my sanity? I felt a buzz in my pocket. A text from Grandma Rose. "The world needs your light, Olivia. Shine on, my girl." I took a deep breath and turned the key. That first night in my new apartment was rough. My roommates were three strangers I'd found on a housing forum, and the walls were so thin I could hear every word of their conversations. My mattress was a hand-me-down from a neighbor and sagged in the middle like a hammock. But as I lay there staring at the cracked ceiling, I whispered to myself, I'm here. I made it. The first week of classes at Granton was a blur. Everyone seemed so polished, so confident, dressed in designer clothes, and talking about their summers abroad. I tried to blend in, wearing my thrift store blazer and carrying the cheapest laptop I could find on eBay. But in the classroom, I felt like I belonged. My first finance lecture was electric. Professor Andrews was an imposing woman in her 60s with a sharp wit and a no-nonsense attitude. She walked into the room and said, "Business isn't about money. It's about problem solving. If you're not ready to solve problems, leave now." I stayed. I learned to juggle my classes and my jobs. My mornings started before dawn. I'd study in the library, from 5 to 7, then head straight to the coffee shop for a morning shift. After class, I'd work another shift at a local bookstore, shelving novels, and helping customers find the perfect read. My nights were for homework and dreams, my apartment window glowing into the early hours of the morning. The exhaustion was bone deep, but I refused to let it break me. When the other students in my program went out for drinks on Friday nights, I was at the shop brewing lattes and calculating how much I could afford to spend on groceries that week. I didn't have time for parties or Greek life. My social life was made up of quick conversations in the break room at work and brief nods to classmates I passed in the library. But I found something else in those moments of solitude, the quiet thrill of building something for myself. My first semester passed in a haze of coffee steam and lecture notes. I got an A on my first accounting exam, and Professor Andrews stopped me after class. "You have a natural instinct for this, Miss Carter," she said. "Don't waste it." It was the first time in years that someone in a position of authority had seen me, really seen me, and it lit a fire in me I hadn't realized was there. Meanwhile, back at home, Aaron was thriving in his business program. My parents visited him every other weekend, bringing care packages and taking him out for steak dinners. They never once came to see me in my drafty apartment, never once asked how I was managing. I told myself I didn't care. But some nights when I was too tired to sleep, and the hum of traffic outside my window was the only sound I'd let the loneliness wash over me. I'd think about all the times I'd hoped they'd show up for me and how they never did. But those nights didn't break me. They made me sharper, more determined. If they couldn't see my worth, I'd show them through my actions. I'd build a future so bright that even they couldn't ignore it. By the time finals rolled around, I was running on fumes, but I'd never felt more alive. The numbers, the analysis, the case studies, they were all puzzles, and I was learning how to solve them better than anyone else. My professors noticed. My classmates started to notice too. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. One evening after a particularly long shift at the bookstore, I came home to find my roommate Jasmine waiting with a steaming bowl of soup. "You're going to burn out if you keep going like this," she said. "Let me help." That simple act of kindness reminded me of something Grandma Rose always said. Family isn't always blood-live. It's the people who show up when it matters. I took the soup with a grateful smile. In that moment, I realized that while my parents might never be the family I needed, I was building a new one meal, one small act of care at a time. And as I fell asleep that night, full of warm broth and an even warmer hope, I knew one thing for sure. No matter how tough the road ahead, I wasn't alone anymore. By the start of my sophomore year, my routine had become second nature: early mornings in the library classes and back-to-back shifts that stretched long into the night. But beneath that routine, something had shifted. I was no longer just surviving. I was building a life that was entirely mine. One morning, I arrived at the coffee shop bleary-eyed but determined, and my manager, Sean, pulled me aside. "Leave," he said, his brow furrowed. "I heard about your finance classes. There's an opening for a bookkeeper here if you're interested. It pays more than barista work." It was a lifeline I didn't hesitate to grab. Bookkeeping meant flexible hours and real-world experience that would bolster my resume. It meant fewer late nights, maybe even enough money to finally replace my frayed winter coat. I took the job that afternoon, and as I keyed in the first set of inventory numbers, I felt the faintest glimmer of pride. I wasn't just paying my bills, I was stacking small victories, one spreadsheet at a time. Classes at Granton grew harder that year. My professors seemed determined to separate the merely good from the truly exceptional. Professor Andrews was especially tough. Her lectures, relentless, her assignments, grueling. But every time I handed in a paper or aced an exam, she gave me that nod, the one that said, "I see you." Meanwhile, Aaron's life at Granton seemed like a different world altogether. He'd joined a fraternity posting pictures of neon-lit parties and sunny beach trips on his social media. Our parents visited him every few weeks, posing for photos with him on the university quad. I tried not to look at those pictures, but they had a way of finding me little digital reminders of everything I was missing. Then, in November, something happened that cracked the illusion of Aaron's perfect life. I was at the library buried in notes for an upcoming economics midterm when I heard my name. Liv. I looked up to see Aaron standing there looking almost sheepish. His usually perfect hair was mussed, his eyes shadowed with worry. "What are you doing here?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "You never come to the library." He ran a hand through his hair, glancing around like he didn't want to be seen. "I need your help. I'm failing my finance class." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to say no, to let him flounder the way I had been forced to for years. But another part, the part that still remembered late nights of us whispering secrets in bunk beds, as kids couldn't turn him away. "Okay," I said finally. "Let's find a quiet corner." We spent the next 3 hours poring over his notes, me explaining terms and strategies that he'd never bothered to learn. His face was a mask of frustration, but slowly I saw the gears turning. When we finally packed up, he gave me a sheepish grin. "Thanks, Liv. I owe you." I shrugged, but inside, something unexpected shifted. It was the first time in years that he'd looked at me as more than just his older sister. He saw me as someone who could help. A week later, Aaron texted me a photo of his midterm grade AB. "Couldn't have done it without you," he wrote. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of real connection. But even as my relationship with Aaron thawed, things at home remained unchanged. My parents called him every Sunday, but weeks would go by without so much as a text from them to me. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I didn't need their approval. But some nights, when the apartment was quiet and my roommates were out, the silence felt suffocating. During winter break, I stayed in the city working extra hours to save up for tuition. My roommates went home to their families, leaving me alone in the drafty apartment. One evening, I curled up under a pile of blankets, scrolling through social media photos of holiday dinners and glowing Christmas trees. My phone buzzed with a text Grandma Rose. "Missing you this Christmas, Liv. Remember, you're always enough even when others can't see it." Her words settled over me like a warm quilt. I closed my eyes, imagining her tiny kitchen with the smell of cinnamon and pine, the way she always had a pot of tea ready and a listening ear. In that moment, I realized that while my parents' approval might always be just out of reach, Grandma Rose's love was constant, unwavering. Back on campus in January, I threw myself into my classes and the bookkeeping job. Professor Andrews noticed. After one particularly challenging case study presentation, she pulled me aside. "Olivia," she said, her eyes sharp and assessing, "have you ever considered entrepreneurship? You have a mind for innovation. It's rare." The idea had flickered in the back of my mind before, but hearing her say it gave it weight. I started spending my evenings researching small business models, sketching out plans in the margins of my notebooks. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to build yet, but I knew I wanted it to be mine, something that no one could take away. Then, in March, the coffee shop announced they were cutting back hours. My careful budget was obliterated overnight. Panic threatened to swallow me, but I forced myself to breathe. I went straight to the financial aid office and explained my situation. Ms. Harper, the assistant director, leaned across her desk, her expression sympathetic. "Olivia, She said you're not alone in this. I'll see what I can do. The next day, she called me back. I managed to get you an emergency grant, she said. And Professor Andrews has recommended you for a research assistant position. It pays better than your job at the shop. Relief and gratitude flooded through me. I took the position working with Professor Andrews on a project about resource optimization in small businesses. The work was challenging and exhilarating, a real-world application of everything I'd been learning. The money helped, but more than that, the experience lit a new kind of fire in me. I was no longer just a student trying to get by. I was becoming someone with something real to offer. By the end of the semester, I felt like I'd crossed a threshold. My grades were higher than ever. My research work with Professor Andrews was turning heads in the department. Even Aaron was calling me regularly, asking for advice on his classes. It was as if, for the first time, people were starting to see what I'd always known was there. One night, as I walked back to my apartment, under a sky studded with stars, I thought about how far I'd come. I wasn't just living in the cracks of my family's attention anymore. I was building something solid, brick by brick, hour by hour. And in the quiet glow of those streetlights, I realized something else too. I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for me. Spring arrived at Granton University with a burst of cherry blossoms and a palpable buzz of anticipation for final exams. But for me, the excitement was overshadowed by the looming weight of my balancing act. My days were consumed by back-to-back classes, late-night research for Professor Andrews, and the bookkeeping job that now felt as familiar as breathing. My small apartment above the mechanics garage had become both a sanctuary and a battlefield. Jasmine, my roommate with a heart of gold, had become an unexpected anchor in the chaos. She would slip notes of encouragement under my door scraps of paper with phrases like, "You're a force of nature," or "Don't let them dim your light." I taped them to the cracked mirror above my dresser, a collage of borrowed faith that kept me going when my own confidence wavered. But even as my determination grew, the gap between my life and Aaron's became more painfully obvious. He breezed through his classes, his weekends filled with fraternity parties and road trips, his Instagram a highlight reel of laughter and easy success. When he called, it was usually for advice, how to frame an argument in his finance essays, or how to handle a group project with a slacker teammate. I helped him, of course. I always had. But the ache in my chest every time I hung up the phone reminded me that I was still on the outside looking in when it came to our family. One rainy night in April, that ache turned into something more. Aaron showed up at my apartment, unannounced, drenched and shivering. "Liv!" he said, his voice breaking. "I'm in trouble." I pulled him inside, grabbing an old towel to wrap around his shoulders. "What happened?" He sank onto the battered couch, his hands trembling. I've been failing 2 classes. I didn't tell Mom and Dad they think I'm doing great. But if I don't pass, I could lose my scholarship. And, Liv, I don't know how to fix this." His desperation hit me like a punch. For years, he'd been the golden boy, the center of their universe. Seeing him like this, vulnerable, cracked open, was jarring. "Okay," I said, my mind already shifting into problem-solving mode. "We'll figure it out." I spent that weekend turning my apartment into a makeshift study hall. I sat across from Aaron at my tiny kitchen table, coaching him through concepts he should have mastered months ago. It was grueling. He was so used to skating by on charm and quick answers that real effort felt foreign to him. At first, he resisted. "Why is this so hard for me and so easy for you?" he snapped one night, frustration making his voice sharp. "Because I've had to fight for every inch," I shot back, surprising even myself with the intensity of my response. "No one handed me anything, Aaron. Maybe that's the difference." He looked away, shame flickering across his features. But he didn't leave. He stayed, and for the first time in our lives, he listened. By Monday morning, he had a plan to catch up thanks to hours of flashcards, practice exams, and my relentless coaching. He hugged me before he left, his voice low. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Liv." As the door closed behind him, I sank into the chair, exhausted but strangely hopeful. For once, it felt like he saw me as an equal, not just the sister who always managed, but the woman who could pull him back from the edge. But while Aaron's crisis had brought us closer, my own life was a storm of mounting pressure. My work with Professor Andrews had grown into a full-fledged research project on small business resilience, data analysis interviews, case studies. It was thrilling, but it also meant sleepless nights and a mind that never seemed to shut off. One afternoon, as I pored over spreadsheets in the business department's computer lab, Professor Andrews stopped by. "Olivia, you're doing exceptional work," she said, her tone measured and warm. "I've submitted your name for the National Collegiate Business Innovation Competition. Your project could make a real impact." I stared at her, stunned. "Me?" But she raised a hand, cutting off my protests. "You have a perspective most of your peers don't, one forged from necessity and grit. That's what this competition is about. Don't let imposter syndrome talk you out of it." I swallowed hard, nodding. A thrill of possibility raced through me. The idea of presenting my research on a national stage was terrifying, but it also felt like a doorway to something bigger, a chance to prove to myself that I wasn't just surviving anymore. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into the competition prep. I refined my pitch, combed through every data point until I knew them like my own heartbeat. Professor Andrews pushed me harder than anyone ever had, but she also believed in me in a way that was fierce and unwavering. One night, after a marathon session in the computer lab, I collapsed onto my bed and stared up at the ceiling. Jasmine knocked softly and peeked in. "Liv, you okay?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "I'm doing everything I can, but it still feels like it's never enough." She came in and sat beside me, her presence comforting. "Maybe that's because you've spent so long trying to meet other people's expectations. But this competition, this project, it's yours. No one can take that away from you." Her words stuck with me. For the first time, I realized how much of my life had been about trying to earn a place at someone else's table. But what if I could build my own table instead? The night before the competition's first round, I got a call from Grandma Rose. "Your mother told me you're doing something big tomorrow," she said. Her voice was steady, a tether to everything I held dear. "I want you to remember, no matter what happens, you've already won by refusing to let their doubts define you." I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in like warmth on a cold night. "Thanks, Grandma," I whispered. "I needed that." The next morning, I woke before dawn, nerves buzzing like electricity under my skin. I dressed carefully in my best blazer, still thrifted, but pressed and neat, and tied my hair back into a sleek ponytail. In the mirror, I saw a woman who had clawed her way up from the shadows, who had turned every doubt and every setback into fuel. The competition was held in a gleaming conference center downtown. Rows of judges sat behind long tables, their eyes sharp and curious. As I stepped onto the stage, I took a deep breath and found Jasmine in the crowd, her smile like a secret pact between us. I began my pitch, my voice steady, even as my hands trembled. I talked about resourcefulness, about how limited funding and constant setbacks had forced me to innovate. I spoke about the coffee shop, the bookkeeping, the long nights spent juggling numbers and dreams. And as I spoke, I felt the room shift, like they could see not just my project, but the woman behind it. The girl who had once been told she wasn't worth the investment was standing there proving them all wrong. When I finished, the judges asked question after question, their interest palpable. I answered everyone, drawing on everything I'd learned in those endless nights of study. As I left the stage, I felt an unfamiliar weight in my chest, pride. Real bone-deep pride. For once, I wasn't just surviving or managing. I was claiming my place. When I got home that night, exhausted and exhilarated, I found a note from Jasmine on the kitchen table. "No matter what happens, you're already enough." I folded it carefully and tucked it into my journal. Because she was right. And for the first time, I believed it. The weeks after the first round of the competition were a blur of adrenaline and endless preparation. My project had advanced to the final round, and with it came a wave of new pressures and new opportunities. I spent every spare minute refining my pitch, practicing answers to potential questions, and fine-tuning the data I'd spent months collecting. Professor Andrews became both mentor and drill sergeant, pushing me to polish every sentence and anticipate every possible curveball the judges might throw. "Remember, Olivia," she said one evening in her office, "this isn't just about your business idea. It's about showing them who you are, what you're capable of." Her faith in me was unwavering, and I clung to it like a lifeline. But even as I threw myself into the competition, the old fears still whispered in the back of my mind, echoes of my father's voice, my mother's gentle dismissal, the years of being an afterthought. I tried to bury those doubts beneath the work. My days started at dawn and ended well past midnight. Jasmine and my other roommates watched with a mix of awe and concern. "You're going to burn out," Liv Jasmine warned me one night as I hunched over my laptop, my eyes gritty from exhaustion. "I'm fine," I insisted. But the truth was, I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep going. Then, a week before the final round, something unexpected happened. I was walking across campus, my backpack heavy with notes, when I spotted Aaron sitting alone on a bench, his head in his hands. I hesitated, torn between the sister in me that wanted to help and the girl who was still nursing old wounds. But in the end, I walked over. "Aaron, you okay?" He looked up, his expression haggard. "I don't know what I'm doing, Liv," he confessed. "I thought everything would just work out, like it always has. But I'm failing my capstone project, and I don't even know how to start fixing it." For a moment, I just stood there feeling the weight of everything that had passed between us. The years of me supporting him, of him coasting on their expectations. Part of me wanted to say, figure it out like I had to. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw something I hadn't before: genuine fear. Genuine vulnerability. "Come on," I said finally. "Let's go somewhere quiet and talk." We ended up at the little coffee shop where I'd once worked, tucked into a corner booth, with our laptops open and a pile of napkin scribbles between us. For hours, I walked him through what I'd learned about structuring research, about breaking big tasks into small ones. He listened, really listened, and for the first time in years, I felt like we were on the same side. "You're incredible, Liv," he said quietly as we packed up for the night. "I don't think I ever really saw it before." "Maybe because you didn't have to," I said gently. "But it's okay. We're here now." Helping Aaron didn't just feel like helping my brother. It felt like finally breaking the old patterns, like maybe there was a path forward for both of us if we were willing to take it. But while Aaron was working to catch up, I had my own battles to fight. The day of the final round dawned bright and cold, the kind of morning that seemed to crackle with possibility. I dressed carefully in the best clothes I owned, a crisp blazer, a blouse I'd found on clearance shoes that had seen better days, but still carried me forward. When I arrived at the competition venue, I found myself surrounded by students from across the country, polished, confident some of them, with teams of advisors and mentors flanking them. For a moment, panic fluttered in my chest. Who was I to stand among them, the girl who'd spent nights washing coffee mugs and balancing budgets to make ends meet? I took a deep breath and remembered Grandma Rose's words, "The world needs your light, Liv. Shine on." The final presentations were held in a sleek auditorium, the air buzzing with anticipation. When my name was called, I stepped up to the podium, my hands trembling just slightly. I began my pitch, my voice steady and clear. I spoke about the challenges I'd faced, about how necessity had driven me to think differently and create solutions on a shoestring budget. I talked about the real-world applications of my research, about how small businesses could thrive even in the toughest conditions. And as I spoke, I felt something shift in the room. The judges leaned forward, their questions sharp but respectful. They weren't just listening to a student, they were listening to someone who had lived every word she was saying. When I finished, the applause was genuine, and I stepped off the stage with my heart pounding and my head held high. No matter what happened next, I knew I had given them everything I had. Back at my apartment that night, Jasmine and my roommates threw an impromptu celebration. "You did it!" Jasmine exclaimed, wrapping me in a fierce hug. "No matter what those judges decide, you already won." I smiled, the weight in my chest easing. "Thanks, Jazz. I needed to hear that." The next morning, I woke to an email from the competition organizers I had won. My proposal had taken the top prize, $50,000 in funding, and an invitation to present at a national business conference. I sat there staring at the email tears streaming down my face. I thought about all the times I'd been told I wasn't enough, about the nights I'd lain awake wondering if I was wasting my time. And in that moment, I knew that none of it had been wasted. Every late night, every sacrifice had led me here. I called Grandma Rose first. "Oh, Liv," she said, her voice thick with tears. "I always knew. Always." The university released a statement that afternoon, highlighting my achievement and the recognition it brought to Granton. For the first time, my name wasn't a footnote, it was the headline. That night, Aaron called. I saw the announcement, he said, his voice full of wonder. "I'm so proud of you, Liv. You deserve every bit of it." "Thanks," I said softly. "I'm proud of you too." And maybe that was the real victory, not just proving them wrong, but proving to myself that I could do it without their approval, that my worth wasn't conditional, that I had always been enough. When I walked into the business school atrium for the celebration dinner the university was hosting in my honor, I saw my parents standing there. They looked small, uncertain, their usual confident smiles replaced by something else, something like regret. "Olivia," my mother said, her voice unsteady. We're so proud of you." I met her eyes calm and steady. "Thank you," I said simply, because I didn't need their validation anymore. I had already given it to myself. The celebration dinner was held in the business school atrium, transformed by white linen tablecloths and soft lighting that glowed like candlelight. Faculty and students mingled their voices, blending into a low hum of conversation and laughter. In the center of it all, a banner stretched across the wall, Granton University, congratulates Olivia Carter, winner of the National Business Innovation Award. I stood in a small cluster of my mentors and friends, Professor Andrews Jasmine, and a handful of classmates who had cheered me on through every late night and early morning. Their pride was a warm cocoon around me, softening the edges of a moment I hadn't dared to imagine. But even in that glow of celebration, I felt the weight of my parents' presence on the edge of the room. They stood stiffly, their smiles careful, as if they were afraid to step into a story they hadn't written. I excused myself from the conversation and walked over to them, each step measured and calm. "Olivia," my father said, his voice unsure. "We've been talking and, well, we realize we may have been wrong about a lot of things." My mother's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "We always thought we were doing what was best," she said softly, "but I see now how much we missed, how much we underestimated you." I looked at them, the people who had shaped so much of my life through their silence and their expectations. There was no anger left in me, no bitterness, just a quiet, resolute understanding. "Thank you," I said simply. "But I want you to understand something too. I didn't do this for you. I did this for me." My father nodded, his jaw tightening. "I see that now. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. It wasn't a neat bow tied around years of neglect. But it was a start, a crack in the wall they'd built between us, a chance for something new to grow." Later, as the dinner wound down, Professor Andrews pulled me aside. "You know, Olivia," she said, her voice low and warm, "what you've accomplished here is only the beginning. There's a whole world out there waiting for your kind of determination." I smiled, feeling that truth settle deep in my bones. "I'm ready," I said, and I meant it. A week after the dinner, I packed up the last of my things from the apartment above the mechanic's garage. Jasmine hugged me tight at the door, her eyes bright with tears. "Go make the world yours, Liv," she said. "And don't forget this place was your proving ground, but it's not your whole story." I promised her I wouldn't forget. I moved into a small studio apartment downtown, paid for by the competition prize money and the consulting job offer that had come in the wake of my win. Alexander Global Consulting had seen something in my research and my drive, and they wanted me on their team. It was everything I'd worked for and everything I had built for myself. The first day at Alexander Global was a whirlwind of handshakes and onboarding paperwork. But as I stepped into that sleek office glass walls, gleaming in the morning sun, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: absolute belonging. Not because someone else had given me permission to be there, but because I had claimed the right for myself. At lunch that day, I sat with a small group of new colleagues, the conversation easy and bright. When one of them asked, "So what drives you?" I didn't hesitate. "I want to build things that last," I said simply, "and I want to show that even the people no one believes in can change the world." They nodded, and I saw understanding in their eyes. Because in that room, surrounded by people who were also chasing something bigger than themselves, I was no longer the girl who had to prove she was enough. I was Olivia Carter, and I was exactly where I was meant to be. The weeks that followed were a blur of client meetings and strategy sessions, each one sharpening my skills and testing the limits of what I thought I could do. I thrived in that pressure, just as I had thrived in the quiet exhaustion of the coffee shop and the fierce independence of my cramped apartment. Because it wasn't about the title or the salary, it was about knowing that I was the architect of my own future. One Saturday afternoon, I made the drive up to Grandma Rose's cabin in the mountains. We sat on the porch, the air crisp and sweet with the scent of pine. "You did it, Olivia," she said, her voice full of quiet pride. "You turned every no they ever gave you into a reason to say yes to yourself." I leaned my head against her shoulder, the old wooden boards of the porch creaking beneath us. "I couldn't have done it without you, Grandma. You always saw me." She smiled, her eyes twinkling. "That's what family is, Liv. Not the people who tell you who you should be, but the ones who see who you already are." That night, as I lay in the small bed upstairs, I thought about everything I'd left behind and everything I'd found along the way. I thought about Aaron, who was slowly learning to stand on his own feet, about my parents, who were finally seeing me clearly, and about the people like Jasmine and Professor Andrews, who had become the family I chose. And I thought about the next chapter, the one I would write for myself, word by word. On the one-year anniversary of my graduation, I stood on the stage of Granton University again, this time, not as a student, but as a guest speaker for a new cohort of graduates. The atrium was packed, the air electric, with the energy of beginnings. I looked out at their expectant faces, the same mixture of hope and fear I had carried on that day. And I told them the truth. You will be told again and again that your worth depends on someone else's approval, that you're only as good as the family who raised you or the doors they chose to open. But I am here to tell you that your worth is yours alone to define. You can build your own doors. You can break through every wall. I paused, scanning the crowd. And then I smiled. Don't let anyone else's vision of you become your limit. You are the only one who gets to decide how far you'll go. The applause rose around me, a thunderous wave of belief that lifted me higher than I'd ever dared to dream. As I stepped down from the stage, my phone buzzed with a text from Aaron. "Proud of you, Liv. Always." And in that moment, I knew that my journey had never really been about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. About knowing in every fiber of my being that the girl who once sat at the kitchen table while everyone else toasted her brother had grown into a woman who needed no one's permission to shine. Have you ever felt like you had to fight for every inch of your success? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like button if Olivia's journey inspired you, and subscribe to my channel for more stories of finding your power no matter who told you otherwise.